puts in reading material and doing background information on not only the local governments here in Smith County, but the state government and also federal government. And I can tell you, last night we spent about 3 hours interviewing the candidates for the city council race. And Joanne, we do appreciate your efforts, and we'll go look for the speaker.
Okay, thank you. Well, hello, everybody. I'm looking out at some of my favorite faces in the whole world. And you know, I get to see a lot of wonderful faces across Texas, but there are not any that I love more than I love yours. It's good to see you, Rosalie. Okay. I want to go over a couple things with you. Have you already noticed that we have some really nasty campaign ads going on? Have you noticed that? Have you? Have you? In the lieutenant governor's race, and we've got some things going on in the attorney general's race and the railroad commission race, and I have to tell you, I'm going to be really glad when we're done with the runoff election, because I am tired of getting the calls from the campaign staff going, Joanne, can you do this? And Joanne, can you do that? But I want to share with you a comment that Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst made last week, because we don't get this kind of local coverage, news coverage of important issues around here. So if you don't read the major newspaper alerts and Breitbart, Texas, and the Quorum Report like I do every day to stay on top of things, then you wouldn't know this had happened. Last week, Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst spoke to the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. In fact, it was last Thursday. And there were over 2,000 people there, and it was a predominantly Hispanic Latino crowd. And this is what he said. My opponent is anti-immigrant, anti-Hispanic, and anti-woman. And I'm not any of those things. Where have you heard that before? Yeah, that is straight out of a Democrat playbook. I have to tell you, that was just, that report came out at 5:34 on Thursday, just before Good Friday. And I have to tell you, I was mad. I mean, I was really mad about it. Of course, you don't do anything about that sort of thing over a holiday weekend because nobody's going to be paying attention to it. And since last weekend was a holy weekend, we shouldn't have been paying attention to it. However, today, I got 15 very strong conservative women across Texas, and tomorrow morning we're releasing a call for David Dewhurst to publicly apologize for his racially charged statements and his sexist statement, because I have to tell you, Dan Patrick may be a lot of things, but he is not anti-woman, and he is not anti-immigrant and anti-Hispanic, and it is offensive for our lieutenant governor to say that. He needs to stick to the issues, and he needs to debate the merits of that 26% spending increase that he approved as lieutenant governor. That's what he needs to be talking about. So that's one of the things we've been doing. Now, Ernie talked to you guys about the early voting is going to start Monday for school board, for city council, and for bond elections. And those begin on Monday, as I said, and those run through Tuesday, May the 6th. Now, let's not get this confused with the Republican primary runoff. That's a whole different set of dates that we're going to have posted on our website. And this Friday and this weekend, we're going to have information on some of the local races. Let me tell you what the board of directors has done. We've endorsed Martin Hines for mayor of the city of Tyler. You may have already seen that. And tomorrow we will release a statement that we're recommending Don Warren for City Council seat for District 4. Now I'm going to tell you, how many people in here live in the city of Tyler? I'm going to tell you, we have enjoyed, the city of Tyler has enjoyed a low tax rate. They've enjoyed a debt-free city for a while. If we're not really careful, there are factions and special interest in Tyler that want to take the half-cent sales tax that is currently dedicated to paying cash for infrastructure, that being drainage and street improvements, those sorts of things, and instead they want to divert that to special interest economic development. I will tell you, they're, and I could name names, I'll be kind and not do that tonight. They know who they are. And they want to divert that away from the original intent. Now, we can't let that happen. And we also have some folks out there that think it would be just grand to go into debt for a convention center and a whole host of other amenities. Well, you know, part of what we talk about is that the American people are taxed enough already. And we need to do everything we can to keep our money so that we can pay for college and we can invest our money and we can save money for a rainy day. So those are very important. Now, here's something that we will not be involved in. We're not going to take a position on the Tyler Independent School District Board elections because it's a no-win. If you look very closely at the candidates, that's a no-win situation. We're going to focus our attention on areas that we can make a difference. And so that's not an area we can make a difference, so we're going to focus on the city of Tyler. We're going to focus on these runoff elections for the Republican primary. I do not see Jason Ellis here tonight, but Jason Ellis is the Grassroots America endorsed candidate for county court at law. That is very important. His opponent has given thousands of dollars to liberal Democrats and Democrat causes, and he's running as a Republican. So I'm just saying, it's really important for us to do everything we can to support Jason Ellis for that county court at law seat. Now, I think the only candidate I see here tonight is Ms. Tammy Humes. Tammy, would you come forward and tell the folks who you are and what you're running for? And I have to tell you that Tammy is a very impressive lady. She's pretty tough, and I like those tough sisters, Tammy. So you tell them who you are and what you're running for.
My name is Tammy Humes. I am running for the Chapel Hill Board of Trustees, specifically seat 4, the president's seat that's being vacated this year. I'm also spearheading the fight against the $20 million regurgitated bond from last year. Last year, when it came out as an op-ed in the paper about the $31.2 million bond, that's what lit a fire in me. And I immediately reached out to Joanne and said, how do I fight this? And basically she gave me some really good advice and said, dig your heels in and go for it. And I did. And we beat it. And the day that I went and voted against that bond, I told a gentleman here that I would run for the next board election if the bond was defeated. So I'm making good on that promise. I am running for the board. I would appreciate anybody here that is in the Chapel Hill School District to vote for me, but even more so, I would like you to vote the bond down. Talk to your friends. Don't believe what you read in the paper. Don't believe what the superintendent gets on TV and says, oh, we need it, it's all about safety. It's not. My husband is a building inspector and a real estate inspector, and he offered free of charge to inspect every single one of their campuses at no charge and find any health, hazard, and safety issues. They shut him down. They turned him down. They threw red tape at him and said, "We can't do that." Yet the superintendent stands before the public and says, "This bond is all about safety." I don't think she knows what the meaning of safety is. Her idea of safety is an elevator in the football field. Well, I hate to point it out to her, but if the electricity goes out, how are that elevator going to get down to the bottom floor? She has a wish list and an agenda, and I am personally going to pick it apart. I've already made several enemies, and I'm quite proud of it. I don't care if they like me. I'm not being voted in for them to like me. I am being voted in by the people. And I am there to do what the people want, not what I want. I will be outnumbered for a short period of time. But they can't shut me up. And quite frankly, I grew up with 5 brothers. I told on them all the time. That's what I'm going to do to the board. Whether they like it or not, I'm telling. So early voting starts on Monday. I'm going to try and get some signs up just to remind my community of who I am. Most of them know. But if you have friends in the Chapel Hill community, please tell them. Vote for Tammy Humes. She's got a big mouth. She'll shut them down as much as she can. Most importantly, close that bond out. Don't let them do it. Let my husband inspect those schools. I have a 3rd grader in those schools. It is very important that they know, that the people of Chapel Hill know what condition those schools are in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tammy. We wish you all the best. I want to remind some of you who were not at our meeting last time that on Saturday, November the 1st, will be our Champion of Freedom event, the award ceremony and dinner. So y'all be sure you save that date, and we'll have more information as we have that planned. I want to remind you also that next Friday, May the 2nd, here for a regular lunch meeting from 11:30 till 1, Tom Dowdy will be presenting a program on the Convention of the States. Now, that's a hot topic, and there are good conservatives on both sides of that issue. And I think probably Ashton and I have been talking that later in the fall we'll probably host a debate on that and have Mike Connolly, who was here, who spoke last summer, I believe, to give the opposing point of view. So if you don't know what that's all about, that's something that Mark Levin wrote a book about, and it's very, very interesting. So I would ask you all to please come next Friday, May the 2nd. I will be coming back from Austin. I have a showdown in Austin, a press conference next Thursday. Y'all please pray for us about that. I'll be joining my renegade friends in the Life, Liberty, and Property Tour group. We're going to have a press conference at the Capitol because Byron Cook, Lord Byron as we call him, he's chairman of the State Affairs Committee, and he is a wild-eyed liberal Republican, and he wasn't defeated in the primary, but we're not going to stop trying to give him grief. And here's what he's doing. He's having a committee meeting to talk about changing ethics rules and how free speech applies to citizen groups. And the thing about the committee meeting is it's by invitation only to testify before the committee. So I will tell you, you all know Michael Quinn Sullivan and Kathy Adams and Jim and Elizabeth Graham and Tim Lambert from the Texas Homeschool Coalition, and you know none of us are shy. Well, we're going to have ourselves a little fun in Austin before they have that very special elite committee hearing that they don't want to hear. So you know what? We're going to set the tone for that meeting because we're going to beat them, all right? So that's where I'm going to be on Thursday, and I hope to be back then in time. I always try to schedule other meetings while I'm down in the People's Republic of Austin so that I don't have to go back as often. Okay, tonight we have a treat. I've watched some video clips of this lady, and she's one tough sister, and I like that. Conservatives are universally hated by liberals and moderates in both parties. They just can't stand it. And one of the reasons is because they don't make us cry. And they know when we get dug in, we don't give up. So, and Sarah Palin coined the phrase, the title Mama Grizzlies. Well, Tammy Humes, she's a Mama Grizzly. And I have a really good feeling that Karen Watson is a Mama Grizzly. And you don't want to start a fight with them unless you think you can finish it. And I have to tell you, most of the men that tangle with us can't finish the fight. They don't even make a good start, actually. So, let me tell you just a little bit about Karen. She is the founder and president of GOPBuzz.com. It's an internet portal for Republican-centric events nationwide. Karen Watson has written and self-published her first book, Being Black and Republican in the Age of Obama. While she was a high school student in 1984, Karen Watson attended her first Republican National Convention to nominate Ronald Reagan and George Bush, and has remained active in the Republican Party. She is a keynote speaker at various Tea Party and Republican Club events. She communicates the message that conservative values are the right values for all Americans, regardless of race and gender. And we can agree with that. Karen Watson majored in English with a speech and minor and a language concentration in Russian at the University of Texas in Austin. When Karen Watson was a vice president at the Bank of America, she became the #1 mortgage loan officer in units and volume nationwide for 4 consecutive years. Karen opened the Karen Watson Mortgage Company in 2004, and she currently serves the real estate community in North Texas. She is a native Texan who lives in Dallas and has been interviewed on numerous radio and television shows and is in the final edit stages of her second book, How the Democrats Stole the Black Vote and How Republicans Can Win It Back. You all give a warm Smith County welcome to Karen Watson.
Glad to be here. Thank you, Joanne. I appreciate it. As I was driving up here, you just see how beautiful this part of Texas is. It's one of my favorite parts. So, she said, I'm Karen Watson. I'm your neighbor just west over here. I'm out of Dallas, Texas. And I'm going to open up with a joke that I heard in California. So, I'm a native Texan, so bear with me. This guy was saying that there were 2 friends, and one friend had been working at Barnum and Bailey Circus, and his job was to clean up behind the elephants. So he would follow the elephants would poop, and he would just scoop it up. Well, he did this for over 25 years. Then his friend's like, wait a minute, man, you've been doing this for 25 years. Don't you think you can find a better job? And his friend looked to him and said, are you kidding me? And give up show business? And, when I think about kind of what's going on with the black community, that's kind of the same thing. It's like they just kind of don't get it. That the full experience of what it is to be a citizen in this country is dying in the black community because we've been told about victimization and how everyone is against everyone. So I'm just going to tell my story. As Clarence Thomas says, you have to tell your own story. So I'm going to tell my story. I'm a native Texan. I love Texas. I don't care wherever I go. No matter whether I'm in California or Florida, I always tell people about this proud, amazing state that I come from. And it's so weird because I tell them when we do our Pledge of Allegiance in Texas, after we say the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States of America, we say the Pledge of Allegiance to the Texas flag. And they are shocked about it. They're like, what? We have such a proud history. Well, I am one of 4 siblings. My mother deeply believed in the product of education and how education was the great equalizer. So I was placed in, even though my mother was a school teacher and is the most conservative person I know, because she barely believes in public education herself, But she placed my brother and I in public schools and private schools mostly up until I went to high school. And I went to a very unique high school in Dallas, Texas called Government and Law Magnet. My high school was so unique that my graduating class was 17. And I always tell people, imagine being in the top 10% of that class. We were able to do a lot of neat things that most high school students would never have the opportunity to do. We could go to the Dallas Law Library downtown, check out law books. We could sit in the courts and, what we call take scripts of the courts that were going on. We got to know some of the judges because we were in their courts on the other side of the bench, and we got to go to city council meetings. So we got to really take advantage of up-close personal experience of government and law. So in 1984, when the RNC convention was coming to town to Dallas, my mother got a letter that said, your daughter has been selected to participate in the RNC convention. Well, in my house, when my mother said that's something you should do, that was something I would do, so I did. And even though it was in the middle of my summer vacation, I went down to the RNC convention. And I gotta tell you, you don't realize the things that change your life. And if any of you guys were there, it was an amazing experience. They literally had flags that were bigger than this whole building. It was so Americana, and it was so what was all right about this nation. And I tell you, I got to meet a man that I felt not only loved America, but loved Americans, and that was Ronald Reagan. So I was able to see Republican and conservative values beyond this pall of race. And it was such an amazing campaign because the campaign was it's a new day in America. And did all the regalia and all the fine things that America was. And you met this man called Ronald Reagan, and he was tall and handsome and strong, and you just knew that he loved you because you were American. And having met the man, I never once felt that he cared about the color of my skin. Never once. I never once felt that he cared the fact that I was that I was a female, that he cared about all these little holy huddles that we start putting people in. So I was able to see the party outside of the shades of race. Not that it was my first time being considered, the conservative values, because as I said, my mother is the most conservative person I know. When my siblings and I, we would always go to my mom and say, it's not fair, and that's not fair, and that's not fair, she would always say, the fair is in October. We're like, okay. So go back to high school, go back to Government Law Magnet, finish there, end up going to University of Texas in Austin, and did English and studied Russian. So of course, the fact that I was studying Russian is also kind of strange, but it was the Cold War, and I'd met Ronald Reagan, so I was like, I want to study that. So go there, come back, started working for a company called NCNB. We used to say NCNB stood for no cash for nobody. And we became Nations Bank, then we became Bank of America, and I became the #1 loan officer, originator at Bank of America for 4 consecutive years in the country. Not just in Texas, not just in our region, but of all the states where we did business in, and at that time it was 47 states. In 2003, I bought a home in a very tiny, tiny area that's only 2 square miles called Highland Park, if you've heard of that, and happened to buy it on Beverly Drive. So then the news media did a story on me, and it said, guess who's coming to dinner? Staying for a while, that had nothing to do with me. They did that, so there was all this media attention about that. Then, in 2004, January 2004, I opened up my own mortgage company, Karen Watson Mortgage, and have since then been doing mortgage and lending for the whole, North Texas, doing residential and small commercial. So it was really odd to me that in 2007, 2008, when we had the campaigns going, and people would just tap me on the shoulder and say, Karen, aren't you excited about this election? And I'm like, yeah, I'm excited excited about this election, and they would say, don't you just love our candidate? And I would say, yeah, I love our candidate. And they would say, don't you just love, but I was like, wait a minute, are you saying John McCain and Sarah Palin? No, they're like Barack Obama. And I was like, oh my goodness, what about me would make someone think that I would be voting for Barack Obama? You know? I mean, I tell people I'm a numbers girl. I mean, I was in finance, or am in finance, and and I was #1 in the country, so that was well known. I'm a homeowner, bought a home in Highland Park, that was well known. I was a business owner, had, hired more than 40 people to work for me at one time. That was well known. I'm a, member of a Presbyterian church, What about me made someone think that I should jump over everything about that and vote for Barack Obama? And I had been doing things in the Republican Party ever since 1984. So I was like, wait a minute, it's the color of my skin. That's supposed to trump everything. It's the color of my skin. So I have to admit, when Barack Obama and Biden won in 2008, I was disappointed. I wasn't devastated, but I was disappointed. But I said, you know what, Karen? Only a fool would hope that the pilot on the plane that they're on has a bad day. So wish him well. And I did. I hoped he would have been a great president. I didn't vote for him. I campaigned against him. I loved what was happening. I loved Sarah Palin. I mean, everything, and I was even interviewed on the Palin update, and I told them, I said, Sarah Palin is coming out looking like a prophet because everything she said is coming true, but I still wished him well. And we all know what happened. January 2009, he came in with unprecedented approval. 69% of the people wanted him to do great, sent him congratulations, like go for it. But we know what happened. We went from the pan to the fire. We went from, bad to worse. We went from just, this has got to be nonsense. It became self-evident that Barack Obama was not equipped for this position. That I don't care how much hope and change you have, that this man had no idea what he was doing. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And we know that, we experienced that, and it is still, regardless of what the numbers you hear from the media, we know it is still getting worse and worse and worse. So I'm a numbers person, that's what I told you. I think in numbers. And for those of you who are also math people, when the professor comes in at the beginning of the semester and puts your problem, then it was on the board or in your syllabus, they are just expecting you to just keep that problem to the end of the semester. They want you to solve the problem. So I'm always a solutions girl. So I'm like, okay, this is the problem. People aren't getting the message. So let's come up with a solution for that. My thoughts were, I was like, Karen, how did you get it? How did you get the message about what it meant to be a conservative and being okay with being a Republican? So honestly, it was that up-close, face-to-face, person-to-person experience. And unfortunately, as you guys know, too often people feel like you have to have a secret handshake to get into these meetings, that you have to knock 3 times, wait, and they don't realize it's open, it's welcome, it's warm, and that it's for their sake that we're doing this. So I said, we've got to do something where people can go beyond the pedigree, to say, well, my great-great-great-grandfather was Sam Houston. You have to do something a little different to find people to get in and hear what we're really saying. Because you're not going to hear it from NBC, CBS, ABC, and all the other likes. And we cannot expect Fox News to be the water boy for Republican and conservative events or topics or discussions or our mouthpiece. We can't expect that. So I got with some very smart people, and our operations manager for GOP Buzz is here tonight, so if you have questions about technical stuff, he's here to answer those. But I said, you know what, let's do something on the internet where people can come in any time of day anonymously and just find out. So in January of 2012, we launched GOPBuzz.com, and which has been open, unlike the healthcaregov.com or .gov, it's been open ever since we opened it. So in January 2012, this is right before the election, and we started working on the code, was working on it since 2011. But it was, of course, the passion. Get people out there, let people know what's going on. We were getting calls all over the place, and people were calling me, they were like, Karen Watson, your world is about to get really small. This is exactly what we need. We need this outreach, we needed social media, da, 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 da. So ended up, and as we were talking to people all the way from Puerto Rico to Hawaii, and I didn't even know we had Republican clubs in Puerto Rico, so that was life-changing for me. And I was talking to this lady at the National Federation of Republican Women who was over the publicity side, and she and I were talking. We logged in probably 50 hours of phone conversation. And we were like, yeah, you're this, and we were just talking about politics, and it was just, how you get to speak to someone, you just finish each other's sentences, and you're like, okay, you get it, you understand, you have the passion too, you love this country as much as we got it. And so she said, you know what, you're just in Dallas, and I'm in Louisiana. Why don't you post our event and come and be a part of our event in Louisiana? And I was like, you know what, yeah, I'll do that. So I did, posted the event, drove to Shreveport, and I said, Larry, I said, do you want to drive with me? And he was like, yeah, because at the time I was like, this is my first going out, So we get there, and we are sitting in the lobby area of this restaurant, and sure enough, she comes in and kind of does a double take, because she didn't know who we were. And then finally she comes up to me, she's like, you're Karen, huh? And I said, yeah, I'm Karen. And she said, you're black. And I said, and you're not. And she was like, no, you do not understand. I never once, out of all the time we had talked on the phone, she goes, I never once assumed that you were black. She goes, that never occurred to me that I was talking to a black person. It was, she was like shocked. And then here's Larry, he's Asian, so here we are in Louisiana, so it just really was a very interesting luncheon. But she said, you know what, Karen, what you need to do, you need to write a book about being black and Republican. So I said, you know what, I'm a solutions girl, I'm like, I'll do that. So at first, I was going to name the book, The 10 Things You Don't Know About Black Republicans, and chapter 1 was going to be Yes, We Exist. But the more I got into it, I was like, Karen, you have an opportunity with this book to be a change agent. So I did an open mic call to every person who said they were black and Republican, not independent, not just conservative, but who had really borne that brand. And we did an open mic at my home for 8 weeks. And then we recorded it, and then I did all of the data about just some of the, the U.S. Census, not, stuff that was polemic or on one side or the other, but just to really dig in deep. Because see, at first I was thinking the only reason that the left is full of people like blacks and Hispanics and all that was because people didn't even understand what it meant on the Republican side. They didn't have the message of conservatives. They just kind of didn't have it, or hadn't experienced it. It's like I tell people when people tell me they don't like chocolate, and I was like, oh, honey, you've never had chocolate, because if you had chocolate, you'd like it. Or when people say they don't like bacon, I'm like, you've never had bacon, because if you had bacon, you would love it. And I always say the Middle East we need to give them a whole bunch of bacon, because it would make them happy and have them not want to kill themselves and kill us in the process. But the more I got into it and the more I dug into it, the more I realized it's not just that easy. What's happened is that the left, the liberals, have manipulated, have coerced, have choreographed, have managed to place the black community against their grain on the left side. And this has been very well orchestrated. And so what has happened is that the more I dug into it, the more I got into the details of it, I was like, wait a minute. So how did that happen? How is it that we as conservatives have lost our message? How is it that so few black Americans, any Americans, realized that it was Ronald Reagan that was the first Republican president? How did we lose that? How is it that the NAACP, which started out as an organization to commemorate the 100th year of what would have been the birthday of Abraham Lincoln, is now one of the most corrupt liberal arms of the Democratic Party? That's almost like saying Freedom Works was the liberal organization 40 years from now. I mean, how did we lose that? How is it even that Dwight Eisenhower, who came out with the first civil rights bill that was voted down by LBJ and Kennedy? How did we not tell that story? How did we not tell the story that the liberals have been the author and the founders of the Ku Klux Klan? That the NRA was started to protect ex-slaves against the Democratic Party. That it was Martin Luther King Jr. who was a registered Republican. I mean, why are we not telling the truth? Why aren't we, forget what the liberals are doing, why are we not telling the real story about what's going on? And the more I got into it, because remember, I think, the reason I like politics a lot is because it's a numbers game. That's what it is, and we know it, and that's what they know it is. And I said, how is it that the left has confused so many people into believing that the only option for them to vote is for a Democrat? I was speaking to one of my neighbors. Her son works for one of the U.S. Senator's office in Texas, and she said, well, you know what, Karen? Her name is Margo. And she said, I just think that Barack Obama doesn't like white people. And I just told her, I said, well, you know what, Margo? I think you're right. I don't think he likes white people. I said, but he's not all that crazy about black people either. Because under Barack Obama's administration, 43% of black youth are unemployed. What do you think that's going to do to the crime rate? Under Barack Obama's administration, you have a record number of black people who have lost their homes to foreclosure. You have still 2.5% of black Americans still as unemployed as white Americans. And school completion today is less than it was in 1970. There's a chapter in my book called Just the Facts. That's all it is. It's just numbers. And I went all the way from 1970 when they first started doing details of black, demographics, up until the most latest Census Bureau of 2010. Barely moved an inch. Many times have moved backwards, especially when you talk about divorce, especially when you talk about school completion, especially when you talk about going to secondary schools, especially even when you talk about segregation. Isn't it interesting that even today we are more segregated in 2014 than we were in 1970? So, those are just the numbers, and those are just the real numbers. And so I did all of this. We did the book, rushed it out, got it out. It was, of course, in October, because we're doing everything we can to try to be a change agent. This is 2012. And I tell you, when the election was coming through with Mitt Romney, and when he lost, I really, seriously went into a deep depression. That loss of 2012 hurt me more than my divorce. I mean, I cried real crocodile tears because I was like, what? Are you kidding me? We have an economics problem. You had an economic genius. When you have a plumbing problem, do you call the high school dancer to come fix your plumbing problem? Do you call, it was like we have problems, and yet this is the problem we have, and this is the guy who could fix it. And we chose again the captain of the drill team, I was shocked. I mean, I literally went into a depression. And remember that petition to secede from America. They had like 350,000 people in Texas who signed up. I was like number 211. I was like, let's get out of here. Let's get out of here right now, because if we're going to be this stupid to do this, this is nonsense. And I was wearing black all the time because it was my morning clothes. I wrote an op-ed piece that got picked up in the morning news and in the Austin American Statesman, and I love it when stuff gets out in Austin, because I always tell people, Keep Austin Weird was not just a bumper sticker, it was a real campaign. And I just said, I'm going to keep my Romney sign in the yard for the next 4 years as a protest to what I believe was a stolen and goofy election. And even in Highland Park on Beverly Drive, my sign was taken. So, oh, that was crazy. And I was getting hate mail. Are you crazy, Karen Watson? But I was like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? What do we expect? At that time, we weren't even in $17 trillion. Now we are post $17 trillion in debt, headed to 18 trillion, 19 trillion, 20 trillion before this man gets out of office. And most Americans don't even know how many zeros are in a trillion. This is what is so crazy. And I was truly depressed. And what got me out of that depression, and I tell this story wherever I go, whether it's in California or Florida or Oklahoma or Arkansas or Louisiana, it was the story of the Alamo. And I was reading more and more about all the stuff that was going on, and those patriots that told Santa Anna and knew that they had lost and knew that it was going, but they refused, and that everybody was in the Alamo, that there were blacks in the Alamo, there were whites in the Alamo, there were Mexicans in the Alamo, that there were women, there were children. It was a fight for freedom. And when Santa Anna came over there, and of course it took him a while to defeat those proud, amazing patriots, but when he did, and he burned those bodies, and I just kept on thinking, the smell of what that must have been like. The corpse that were burning, and how that must have been, and how brave they did it. And they said, you know what, if you want it, come and take it. And that literally got me off my seat again. And I said, you know what, Karen? That is what we must do. We must remember 2012. Was it a stolen election? I deeply believe so. Was it corrupt? I deeply believe so. But we must get our second win, and we must take this country back. See, when I met Ronald Reagan, it was such a wonderful experience. I had no idea that here it would be in 2014 that I would have to come out and defend what I believe to be so self-evident. We are in court as a nation defending the right to keep in God in our Pledge of Allegiance. In our Pledge of Allegiance. We are in court defending that. We are having to defend the right for the sanctity of marriage in our country. In this country. We are having to stand up and say, wait a minute, we have murdered 55 million children in our country. We can't just be on the sidelines. See, back in 1984, we probably could. We probably could have just, and it's kind of like what you did before this Barack Obama drama, what did I do? You called your friends, you went to vote, you could be what they call the country club Republican, right? Well, I sent him my check. Did you send me your check? Well, I showed up at the meeting. Did you show up at your meeting? I showed up at the poll. Did you show up at the poll? That's all you had to do. Because we didn't realize that, we could lose this nation. Who would have thought, if you would have told Ronald Reagan in 1984, we might not be able to say under God anymore in the Pledge of Allegiance. We might not be able to have a cross to represent a dead soldier in this country. We might not be able to to defend just some basic things that we already have always took for granted. And so after, like I said, got out of the depression, because I was truly in a funk, and I said, Karen, get your second win, because this is not the nation that you inherited. And I said, you know what? My story couldn't even happen again today, and that's so sad, because I'm not that old. And I, like most women, I'm older than I admit to, but for me to have come out from a place in a small area of Dallas to a single mother who worked hard but never once made me feel like I was a victim of my nation, for I can just get in and work hard and do my best. And that's how I became the #1 person at Bank of America for 4 consecutive years. I worked harder than anybody else. And right now, that story can't be duplicated. My position, I eventually became a vice president of the bank, but was what we called an exempt status, which means that, I could work as much as I want. They didn't have to pay me overtime. I could earn my keep and keep what I earned. And now that's changing. They are moving so many people from exempt status to non-exempt status. Well, why in the world are they doing that? Why in the world are they doing that? I worked for 7 days a week up until 6 years ago, when I just said, you know what? Right when I became a deacon of the church, I said, I'm just going to commit one full day as a true Sabbath. I'm just going to do everything I do on Sunday. It's just going to be true church and deacon stuff. But up until that, I worked 7 days a week. That's how you make it in this country. You don't make it in this country by someone giving you something that you didn't earn. And even when I talked to someone, I was talking to a lady today about a mortgage. She goes, well, I'm thinking that she's a veteran. I'm thinking about maybe getting a mortgage or renting. And I said, either way, you're either paying your mortgage or somebody else's mortgage. But it's still paying a mortgage, And that's kind of what we don't even tell people. What we have done is we've told people that somebody owes them something. And when I was born and raised, I was told nobody owes me anything. And don't even have a big head about what you have. People would come up to me and say, oh, Karen, you must be so smart because you speak Russian. My mother told me there are little kids in Russia who speak Russian. You just got to thank God for what you got to move on. I mean, right now we have a true elitist society. As even on the way over here, Larry was saying, we have this imperialist president. And we do. And I know a lot of people, I have friends who are dear to me who have 2 cents in their pocket and people who have 20 billion in their pocket. And I've never met one person who has spent $100 million of their private money on a personal vacation. I've never met anybody that's lived like that. And Barack Obama did it on our money at a time when kids could not even go to the White House. If he had to go on a vacation, just say he had to. Let's say he had worked so hard and he had to go on a vacation, working on his golf swing, I guess. Why didn't he tour Detroit? Detroit went bankrupt under his watch. Why didn't he tour Detroit? If he so cared about the state of black children, as he said, if Trayvon Martin was if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon Martin. But wouldn't he look like those other black kids too, who have died in Chicago, and you mentioned nothing about it? But it happened to be that here it was in 2012, in February, and here was his black child, and that was a corpse he could use. Drag that child out, stir up the races, get people so incensed, say here was this young black child against this gruesome, angry old white man who shot him dead. And who knows what happened? But I tell you one thing, what I do know is that Barack Obama could care less about Trayvon Martin. If Trayvon Martin had been in Chicago, he would not have heard about it. And if he had been in New York, he would not have heard about it. If he had been in any state that they already felt they needed. But wasn't it interesting that Florida was the state to get? We now remember that. Remember, we got to get Florida. Whoever gets Florida wins. So here is the perfect storm. Black child, dead white man, of course, forget that he was Hispanic, but that messed up the narrative. And, so you can get let's bring down Al Sharpton. Let's get him down there with his goofiness. Let's have that all over the news. Let's make it into a federal offense. Let's get people all riled up for the sanctity of his election. Didn't matter what the truth was. Didn't matter if he really cared. Because if he really cared about black youth, he'd be doing something in Chicago where they have the highest number of black children who are dying any place in this country. Same thing with Benghazi. Isn't that interesting? 4 dead. Still don't know what's happened. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that, as the church lady on SNL, you say, isn't that particular? Isn't that just, how do you get that happen? And nobody still knows what's going on. And Susan Rice, isn't that interesting that she had to be a black woman to go out and do the circuits? Because who's going to say something about the black president to a black woman? See, these optics are real, and we have got to stop playing into them. And as I tell people, do you realize what it takes to be an ambassador, even of Budapest? This man, Chris Stevens, for him to have been an ambassador, you had to have bled for that party. You didn't just show up at the poll and you were a poll watcher, won election. No. You paid. You bled, you risked, and yet his life and the lives of the others were worth going down because they dare not tell the truth about what happened on September 11th. That is the sickness of this. So we still don't even know what happened, even though it was on a live feed. Even though Google Earth can tell you what's going on in your house today. They don't know what happened in Benghazi? Still? Do they think we're that stupid? Or are we playing that stupid? And why are we letting them go on? And we know what's happened to the IRS. How many people have been audited by the IRS? And this is America? Is this America? See, when I was studying Russian in Texas at UT, at the time, there were no Russians. So you had to import Russians over here to teach us the language. And I tell you, there was something different about them, and it wasn't the color of their skin. It was something in their spirits. It was something that they lacked in their heart. There was a drive that was not what's Americana. There was a get up and go that they just didn't have. You see what I'm saying? And I got to know these, and it was almost, you could tell them. You could just tell them without them speaking a word. You could tell them. And that same look that I saw in all my Russian professors, I'm seeing it now. I was in Oklahoma speaking, I think in January, and this young girl, she was 18, and you could tell she was dragged there by her mother. But at the end, she got up and she asked a question. She goes, you know what? And this is in Oklahoma, where they do not have a state Democrat. It's Oklahoma, right? But she goes, I am afraid to have children in this economy. 18-year-old Oklahoma. My sister went to Stanford Law School. And as you know, Stanford is now ranked as the #1 school in the country. And I always tell people that's because my sister just graduated there. But, Thomas Sowell, he's there. Do you guys know who Thomas Sowell is? Oh, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Thomas Sowell, who's out on the Stanford campus and who is out there with Condi Rice and he's just one of the best minds there is. And he said, at Stanford, now again, ranked #1 in the country, past Harvard, past Yale, past Princeton. And if you've ever been on that campus, it is drop dead gorgeous. Heaven is going to look a little like that. It is so beautiful. And whenever you see Condi Rice speaking, a lot of times she is speaking, but the campus is in her background, but it's just gorgeous. And he said, students are coming to him worried about the future. I'm like, at Stanford? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I wish I was half half as smart as I thought I was when I was 18. And now we have kids in America that are worried about the future, that don't believe they can make it, that don't know what's going to happen. We have become, remember we were land of the proud, home of the brave, land of the free. What are we now? Home of the timid, land of the overregulated. I mean, how did that happen so quickly? How did that turn so sharply that we are now worried about the IRS, worried about big government spying on us, worried about our nation overtaxed? Companies can't even start businesses because they're overregulated. All these things you have to do just to even sell a lemonade stand for kids. And no one is talking about the fact that we have 50 million Americans on food stamps. What do you think that's doing to them? What do you think that does to the heart that must break for these people who feel like they can't even feed themselves? That they have to go to the government and have the government feed them? Don't we realize what that's doing in breaking not just a heart but a spirit? We also know that since 2013, we had less marriages in 2013. Then the decline is going on. People aren't even marrying anymore. Families are dropping. We also know just from the numbers that we have less patents, that we have less trademarks, that less businesses are starting up. If we don't change this around, we're going to decline. I don't mean decline like we just went back a step. I mean, we're going to be something we don't want to be. We're going to be a nation we don't want. And we have to remember that we are the people and that the politicians work for us. They are civil servants. And I know they have forgotten because they're neither civil nor are they servants. But we need to remind them that we have the power. And when Barack Obama said, well, you know what, I have a pen and I have a phone. Don't you have a pen? Don't you have a phone? We must take our power back. This is not right. We have let this happen on our watch. When I was studying history and I was studying the time of what was going on during World War II with the Nazis, and I always used to say, what were the Germans doing? How did they let this happen? There's going to be a chapter written about us, you guys. And they're going to say, what were the Americans doing? How did they let their debt get that out of control? How did they let their country get that fractured? How is it that we talk more about slavery in 2013 and 2014 than we were talking about it in 1913 and 1914? How is it that Roots is always on TV? How is it that, the movie is 12 Years a Slave is a great movie? And I tell people, I'm so glad it wasn't 13 Years a Slave. Why are we always throwing salt in the wound on things to keep people separated? And I will tell you, I am not an apologist for racism, because racism is real, and racism exists. And it is hurtful, and it is harmful, and it will hurt you to the bone. But racism is not the unscalable mountain. Racism is not the big boogeyman under the bed that's coming out to get you every time you peek under the covers. Racism is not the enemy. And what we must do is realize that white guilt is one of the worst forms of racism. There's a chapter in my book about that. We must do things differently. And I always ask for 3 things, and I'll wrap it up with these 3 things and take questions if that's okay. The first thing we must do is deeply and truly pray for this nation. And I don't mean like when someone, sneezes and you say, God bless you. I mean sincerely, intentionally, deliberately pray for this nation. For those of you who studied history, you know that during World War II, there were people who were praying for this nation every minute of the day. That is the reason we won. That is the reason evil was defeated. We must. I have sign-up sheets back there. Join with me. We are honestly, deliberately praying for our nation to turn our nation back so that can heal our land. The second thing we must do is not play these goofy games of the left. Because I'll tell you, I sit before you and stand before you, I am not an African American. And you're not a white American. And there's no Asian American. And there's no Hispanic American. All of that is nonsense. When I was speaking at the Lincoln Day dinner in Denton, and I saw Diana Acosta there, she is lovely. We were talking before the event. She spoke, and of course, where they asked her, well, tell us about the Hispanic Initiative. Then I was like, wait a minute. And I said, Diana, girl, I love you. You're awesome. But let me tell you, you're not a Hispanic American. You're just an American. When we were in Russia, in the Olympics, was there an African American team? How many did the African American golds did they get? How many did the Hispanic, how much gold, what silver did they get? What did the Asian Americans, I mean, it's insanity. If we can be Americans abroad, we can be Americans at home. When I was speaking to a guy in Oklahoma, there was another event I did in Oklahoma for one of their big fundraisers, and this guy said, well, Karen, what do I do when somebody says, whatever? I said, we must turn the argument around, and the answer that you can give anybody that wants to divide and wants to be a little holy huddle is that you might see yourself as an Asian American. I see you as an American. You might see yourself as a Hispanic American. I see you as an American. You might see yourself as a Black American, African American. I see you as an American. And that is what makes the most sense. The sum is greater than the parts. If we do not stop the silly game of division, we will be destroyed. Simple, first and foremost. We will not survive this. We will not survive all these little groups, all these little holy huddles, and then we start talking about all the things that makes everybody so different. So, of course, that's why they have the movie Cesar Chavez coming out, right? Because they got to keep on reminding people of how different we really are. We are Americans. We will survive as Americans. We will die if we try anything else. It is a lie from the pit of hell. My mom used to tell me that there was this lady who was so racist, and she was dying, this white lady, and she was dying, and she went to her pastor on her deathbed, and her pastor comes up to her, she goes to the pastor, she tells the pastor, she goes, Pastor, will there be black people in heaven? And he goes, yeah, there are going to be black people in heaven. She goes, well, I don't want to go there. He said, well, they're going to be in hell too. We have got to stop playing this game. We're just Americans. It's silly, it's goofy, it's insane. The third thing we must do is we must truly and honestly see everybody, anybody, I don't care if they're black, white, green, yellow, purple, old, young, whatever, assume that they want the same things that we want. They have the same cares that we want. That they have the heart that we want. Why are we assuming that people would want something different? Why are we assuming that someone would not want what we have? We have a wonderful brand. We don't always live up to it, but we have a wonderful brand. It's about liberty. It's about freedom. It's about opportunity. I've never met a person who would rather have an Obama phone than an opportunity. I've never met a person that would rather have, stay under welfare instead of on their own company. When I was speaking in Galveston, it was in this hotel, and outside was this gorgeous hotel, and outside was the, Galveston, by the Gulf. It was so rah, 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 and then so it came out, and there was this young bellhop, and I was going back to my car to get more books because I ran out. And so the guy comes up, and he's like, what are you doing in there? He couldn't have been 18, something like that. And I said, honey, we're saving the world. That's what we're doing. We're saving the world. We're saving it because, I could have just been, even tonight, the reason I'm not at my house in Highland Park on Beverly Drive is because we've got to save our country. Because when the opportunity I had, it's not here anymore. The gains that I was given to, it's not here anymore. And it is worth it for me to drive out here and tell what I have to tell and change the story, because it has been a lie. And the other thing is that I want you to know, because I told you I'm a numbers girl, so bring it at me, because I can look at the numbers inside and out. I don't care how you look at it. And we know, the numbers know, that if the black community voted, if we got half of the percentage that Nixon got in '68, there would be no statewide Democrat. So that means no Nancy Pelosi, no Harry Reid, no Barbara Boxer, no Feinstein, no statewide Democrat. The numbers know that if you take out New York City from the state of New York, New York's a red state. If you take out Philadelphia from Pennsylvania, that's a red state. If you take out Detroit from Michigan, it's a red state. So why are we not dealing with the real story? Because we've got people who are so confused about their own sense of being able to who to vote for. And it is the only thing that is going to work. We don't have to get 100% of anything. Our first Republican president said that you can fool all the people some of the time. Some of the people all the time. So you don't have to, we don't need 100% of the people. We need 18%. And how is that not doable? Are you telling me that in this economy that has hurt black Americans most? When I was on the KNON radio station, which is a gospel radio station, I have to tell you, going in for the interview, first thing I see is a shrine to Barack Obama. So I'm like, this is going to go great. But part of the interview, I said, you know what? I am tired of the black community being a cheap date for the Democratic Party. This one woman said, you got me, I don't know about all the other stuff, but you got me on that cheap date part. So what we must do is talk to our brothers and sisters and say, you know what, I know you're hurting, and you have not been treated right, and you've not been treated well, and you have been manipulated, and they have used you. Because the Democratic Party doesn't care about black America? Not at all. Not at all. If they would have did more. They don't care. They assume that there's no way they would vote differently. But things are changing. We have wonderful people like Anita Moncrief. We have wonderful people like Alan West. Wonderful people like Dr. Ben Carson, who is like one of my heroes. Wonderful people like Thomas Sowell and Herman Cain and Clarence Thomas. And people are saying, and Alan West, and people are saying, enough. Enough. This is crazy. And Star Parker. I mean, I can just go on, and people are saying, not on my watch. That chapter will not be written without me saying, out of my cold, dead hands, you took our economy, our liberty, and our freedom. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. That was great. For anyone that would like to ask a question, please raise your hand with a card. There should be a card on your chair, and we will come around and pick them up, and Patty will read the questions, and you don't mind answering a few questions?
No, I love questions. Yes, my books are $20.
Oh, and books.
My books are $20. Please get them. They're in the back. My friend from when I was in California, after he read the book, he goes, are you afraid about what they're going to do to you with this book? I said, they better be afraid of me, because I'm on the right side, and I have, I have faith in God, so I'm good. So,
could you be talked into signing
yes,
the book? Okay,
definitely.
I thought maybe you could.
Yes.
Thank you.
Y'all know I don't need the microphone, but come on, we need some questions. This lady is pretty awesome. Is this the best we can do? Am I on?
Yes.
I don't think so.
What's the name?
Marcy? Or you say, don't use it? It should be on right now. Okay. Does racism go both ways?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's white guilt to say it doesn't. But what's happening is that whenever you have someone and you are constantly making them a victim, then what they do is they live out that victimhood. And what they do, if you go around and you always tell someone, they're against you, they're against you, they're against you, 99% and 1%, I mean, how do you come up with those numbers? But no, racism goes both ways. And if we start seeing ourselves as all of this goofiness, then people act out in this stuff. And they don't tell the truth. Because if we were telling the truth about what's happening with black youth who are attacking white people, if it was the other way around, you'd hear all about the news. You'd hear over and over about how all these white people are attacking black people, right? Why aren't they talking about the increase of black on white crime? It's racism. It's racism. And of course, when you look at, do you think that Al Sharpton is not racist? Oh my gosh. Al Sharpton is really all about Al Sharpton. But, and Barack Obama is all about Barack Obama. And, you know, and he's not, I mean, you know, so, but yeah, no, it definitely goes all the way. And it's unfortunate, and it's a sin.
Since you're all about solutions, how do we change the color of our membership?
That's a great question. How do we change the color of the membership is that we keep on talking. Wherever you go. When I was down speaking at the Austin Tech Republican Club, there was a gentleman, he was serving us in the room. He was Black American, he was young, probably in his 20s. After I finished speaking, he was like, you know what? You said some pretty good things. I said, yeah, because, you know, you're Republican, aren't you? He said, I am. Now, this group had been meeting, this was after my speech, they had been meeting in this place for years, and the guy that had been serving them was a Republican. And so I said, wait a minute, I want to let everybody know. I was like, hey, this guy's a Republican. The president of the club said, you know what, Karen? I have to tell you, all this time, I assumed he was a Democrat. We have got to start assuming that people are Republicans and they're conservatives. I used to think that the party was always preaching to the choir, but now I realize we need to baptize the congregation. We need to let people know what we're about. And why would they not be? Who would want what they have? It's their children that are unemployed. It's their homes that were foreclosed. It's their wealth that has been decreased. We are in the proper time now to make things happen. One thing, when I was in California speaking, and oh my gosh, this was crazy. So headed out to Los Altos, which is right outside of San Francisco, and I'm even thinking, I'm like, it's California, you know, how conservative can they be? I'm even having that thought in my head. And yet, so I get there, and they had me scheduled it was a true 25-hour day. I was up and, woke up at 4 a.m., caught the plane, got to California at 9. They had me routed to, and it was so crazy because I was thinking, what do I wear? I know, guys, but women always think, what do I wear on the plane? So I'm thinking, let me wear something comfortable. These people have never met me before, but I just wore some brown slack or beige slacks, a beige t-shirt, and a jacket. And went through the whole plane, never once spoke anything, so it was cool. Get there, they were like, okay, we got an interview for you to go to. We want you to do this TV interview with this, I hadn't even had a chance to get to the hotel. We want you to do this TV interview with the Oakland Post publisher. And this happened to be the time that Jesse Jackson was in California. I said, is he here to protest my speech? Paul Ryan was at Berkeley, and here I am at Los Altos. So we get there, and the Oakland Post guy, I could tell his body language. He was like, who in the world is this woman? I don't have time for this woman. It was just like already antagonistic. I didn't realize, this is like one of my first TV interviews, so it's that green room and those lights were so hot. I happened to spill the first time the coffee right there, and all the TV people were like, oh my gosh, they thought it was a horrible thing. So then they had to change my jacket, so now I'm like all covered up when I wasn't. And those lights were so hot, I felt, of course this was before my time, but of course I studied politics, and remember the Nixon-Kennedy debate where Nixon was sweating? I think that was me, because I was like getting hot, and here's this man asking me all these questions, and at the time, he was, we went from basically, I don't ever want to meet a black Republican, till at the end, he was like, you know what, I am working on an insert that's going to go into 700 churches, and I want your column to be in my insert. So, and it all became because of what I was telling them. You know, see, people have a narrative and they don't understand. And here's this man who he said has written, you know, speeches for Jesse Jackson. He's been around since Martin Luther King. And there's always the water, you know, the water fountain story, which of course Karen, you didn't experience that because I was a pastor at the time. And I told him, I said, I acknowledge the civil rights era. I acknowledge those marches. I acknowledge how swollen those feet must have been. I know that it was real blood. I know that Martin Luther King Jr. was a real man, and he took a real bullet, and he had a real family, and he died. And I know that people, those freedom riders were real people. And I know that those bites that they got from those dogs were real. And that water fountain sprayed on them was real. And them being attacked was real. And they were hanged. And they did not do it for this. And he was silent. I said, they did not bleed for this. They did not die so that today in 2014, 43% of black youth could be unemployed. They did not suffer because they suffered. And beyond the people whose names we know, there are so many whose names we will never know. And they were not saying, you know what, I will walk this 100-mile, cross this bridge so that black children could be murdered in the wombs of black women. They did not do that so that black unemployment could still be 2.5% of what it is today. And he said, okay, well, I'm a Republican. So, yeah, there are ways, it's letting people know. It is because we care. Because it is about America. Because, see, you know, the first person to die for that flag was a black man, Crispus Attucks. But we have gotten people so divided now where people are coming and going. And this president, who could have united us, has divided us. And this is despicable.
What happened to the black evangelical pastors that took a stand against Obama after he came out in support of gay marriage?
A lot of them just have been quiet. A lot of them have been told to be quiet, but it takes a boldness. See, I always tell people Jesus has a lot more fans and followers. And it's a lot easier to say you're a Christian than to be one. And it's a lot easier to say, oh, yay, yay, yay on Sunday, but not live it on a Monday. And, you know, there's a narrow way. And it's unfortunate. But time is changing. And it's not easy to stand up here and to say the things that we say. And I'll never forget Senator Birdwell. He said, if you don't know his story, he was at 9/11, and he's an amazing man, but he says, you don't realize how hard this is for someone like this. And when he was talking about me, because she's attacked. And when I was speaking at one of the events, and this lady, she said, well, Karen, you know, it's also hard to be a woman and be a Republican. And I said, yeah, I get that. I said, but when you're black, there's a surcharge. You know? We, as a party, have to also give cover. How do we let them say the things they said about me in love? How do we let them say the things they said about Condi Rice? Condi Rice is a child prodigy. I don't care if she was green. And for her to not be able to speak at Rutgers? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Condi Rice? But, you know, if it had been Ahmadinejad or some Muslim, oh, let's let him come. Oh, let's do that. Condi Rice, who was playing the piano at 6, you know? I mean, my Russian can be a little spotty, but hers is spot on. I mean, this woman is so brilliant. She was canceled? Yeah, you know. Did we speak up? Did we give her cover? When they took down Herman Cain and Clinton, oh my gosh, if he is not the sleaziest person who's ever been in the White House, you know, with an intern, I mean, if there are so many things wrong about that. But, you know, when we let them go after black conservatives and we're just quiet, we must stand up. When Dr. Ben Carson said he had been audited, by the IRS? I'm just like, oh, really, you too? No, we have to be bold, and we have to stand up and say, you know what? Enough. We have to call them on the carpet. When Barbara Walters would say, oh yeah, we thought that Barack Obama was going to be the Messiah. Now, if that didn't land her into an invitation to the Kooky House, I don't know what else. You know, how do we have people say these things? How do we have people, forget Chris Matthews. I mean, how do we have people continue to say these things that clearly show their deep bias? Someone should have said, you've lost your mic privileges, Barbara. You definitely have had just way too much nip and tuck because your brain isn't... Well, I'll just leave it at that. I am at a church.
Your story is great, but how do you get the Black community on board? They are not listening.
Thank you for saying that. Well, that has been something that we're doing, and that's what everyone's saying. One thing that we are doing is that we are getting my books donated to a lot of the places. And this has happened just yesterday because so if you want to join in that and you want to buy some of my books to be donated, I'm speaking on Saturday to a Breaking Down the Barrier event in Dallas, Texas. And if any of you guys know Dallas, there's a place called Redbird Mall. We used to call it Redbird Mall. It is deep in the hood. Deep in the hood. But you have to do things strategically. When the party was first doing something, I grew up in Oak Cliff. I am an Oak Cliff girl, and I live in Highland Park now, but I tell people I'm from Oak Cliff, which is the majority Black area. And when the party first said, oh, let's just go, and we did a barbecue, and they said, wear tons of red. I was like, I'm a show, because, I get it. But, this is a Crip neighborhood, and they were blue, and I said, let's just make sure everyone is out by a certain time, because these are real deals. There are real gangs, and they really kill people. You know what I'm saying? And a whole bunch of red is not the smart color in a Crip neighborhood. So what we're doing is, I said, what we need to do, and I did this, and it was like the party just like wink, wink, they're like, whatever. But I just went ahead and did it myself. I said, we went to Redbird Mall, and we held a group, we just named it Breaking Down the Barriers, and it was October 12th, and the lady, I told her, I said, well, I want to have a Republican event here. You let Democrats have events here. I can't tell you the struggle that I went through, but as I tell people, I didn't get to be number one at Bank of America without just saying, oh, you said no? Oh, really? No just means, who else do I need to talk to? Went through all of that. Finally told people, I said, if you've done it for them, you're going to do it for my side. And so it opened up, and we held it there. And people begin to get it because you hear the real stories. So on this Saturday in Dallas, Redbird Mall, we're having another Breaking Down the Barriers event where it's about, it's people talking about conservative ideas. So if you want to help and donate books for that, that would be great, because I got a guy that called me just yesterday. And he called and he goes, Karen Watson? I'm like, yes. And he goes, well, I got your book. I'm thinking, oh, okay, And I didn't know if he was Black or white or another. But this man, we spoke for 40 minutes. And this man, he goes, I so appreciate what you did. And he was talking about, he goes, people have left God. And, we were talking, he goes, I just finished reading it. And he said, it touched my heart. It's changed my thoughts and it's changed my ideas. That was from one of the books that was donated. So please help me. There are going to be probably we've already got about 30 books that have been donated. I'm looking to get 100 because there are going to be lots of people and I want to get them into their hands. So please help me with that. But that's how we do it. We do it one at a time. And I told that man, I said, let's hang in there. Because they're hurting. Because they have been lied to. Because the left offers nothing but lies and lies and lies. And we sit around and we don't stand up and say, I know you've been lied to. I know, and I tell you when that lady said, I got her, she goes, when you said cheap date, she goes, that was it. She goes, I don't even need to, she goes, I am not changing anymore. I get it. I am tired of it. What do they have to offer? What? Another Obama phone? What do they have to offer? What do we have to offer? Life. Do you imagine what it does? I don't care what side of the aisle you are on the abortion aisle. I don't care what side you're on. You gotta know there's something wrong when it is the most dangerous place for a black child to be is in the womb of a black woman. You gotta know that there's something wrong when more black children are being aborted in New York City than live births. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. There's something wrong. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on when it comes to a lot of this goofiness. And Common Core, let's not even begin to talk about that. The greatest equalizer in this country is education. Why do you think my mother sacrificed so much? There were so many other things she could have done without paying. My mother paid out of a teacher's salary for my brother and I to go to private school. She didn't get a dime, and she wasn't even getting child support. My mother paid for that because she knew the best way to make it in this country is to have a mind, to think. And even even though she was a public school teacher, but she put me and my brother in private school all the way up until it wasn't even until they opened up a magnet school called Government and Law Magnet. And then she said, I found a school that would be great. It's kind of like a private school. You had to test to go in and stuff like that. Like I told you, 17, it's my graduating class. But that is what America is about. It is about a young girl like me who could end up in the ghetto is what people would call it. But even the ghetto was not the ghetto then. People were poor, but they had pride. They worked. I never remember, no one in my family took a dime from anybody. It was a shame. It was a shame. We might have worn clothes from Goodwill, but we didn't take anything. We were proud because, we earned it. And it was about hard work. Now people think that hard work is a 4-letter word. And they talk about the rich as if we stole the money. And keeps people divided, keeps people from learning about what to do, about how to go and make it in this country. So we can do it by being honest and open. The way to get it in is please help me get more of those books to be donated to Breaking Down the Barrier, which is on next Saturday or this coming Saturday. And I have told people, no matter where I've spoken, I've been speaking all over the country. If you get somebody in front of me and you're like, I want you to come and speak to this person and talk about what's going on, I'm there. I'm there.
Isn't it easier to be a victim than to take responsibility for your own failure?
In the beginning, it is. If you want to be a victim, it feels good at the beginning because you think, oh, no one's going to, bother me. But what you lose is that opportunity. What you lose is that sense of accomplishment. And that sense of accomplishment, no one can take away from you. When I became the #1 person at Bank of America, my record is still unbroken. But I earned it. I earned it. And what that meant to earn something, what that's all about, we take that away from people. You have to scale that mountain. I know people who have scaled Mount Everest. For what? Because they did it. Because other people won't do it. When people run marathons, they do it for their own accomplishment. Because what it does inside, how it's a shame that we don't talk about the value of earning, of owning, and where something no one can take away from you. And yes, I worked so hard, but no one can take away my accomplishment. No one can deny it because it was there. When you scale that mountain, when you cross that finish line, it's better than the reward. It's better than the accolade. It's what it does to you. And you talk to people who've done amazing feats, and they'll tell you, crossing the finish line was great. Summiting that mountain was great. Being #1 at a certain level is great, but what it does to you is greater. And we aren't talking about success anymore because they don't want anybody to be success, because that's what socialism is about. Socialism is about keeping people below. Socialism is not about someone saying, you know what, what's your idea? Why don't you come up with something? Why don't you plant it in this fertile soil called America and try to and dream bigger? When people say they want to open up one restaurant, say open up 10. You want to do it. We are not telling people to go for their dreams because they don't want people to go for their dreams. They want people to be in a small little circle where they won't ever break up, because who else is going to pay for Barack Obama's $100 million a week vacation? So they want all these people to just not have any gumption and do what they can do. What would happen if people started dreaming again? People would come up to me when I was at Bank of America, and they would say, Karen, are you surprised that you are number one? Because they're always ranked. That's one thing I loved about finances. All of you know where you are. And I said, no. I started out to be number one. That's all I wanted to be. And I wasn't number one by like a hair. I was number one by a mile. And I relished in it, and I enjoyed it. And that's what people are missing. They're missing what that is about. And that's a shame, because that's what America was. Remember when you said, we're number one? Didn't we used to say that as America? We're number one, we're number one. Who's heard that lately? Number one in debt. Number one in debt.
The most segregated hour in Tyler is 11 to 12 a.m. Sunday. How do we change that?
I think, unfortunately, that is a misnomer. Most people, I am a member, I'm a deacon at my church, Highland Park Presbyterian Church. My church is full of octogenarians. You know, people would say, well, Karen, that's why you don't have a husband, because everybody in your church is over 90. You know, and I always say, you don't go to church because of that. You go to church because you want to grow in God. That's why you go to church. Most people attend a church because it's close to them, or that's where they're led. Once we kind of get that, then we can always open up a time for people who, because Christ is not about a color. Christ, and don't even get me started on that, but it's so beyond race and class. It's, you know, it's Jesus. And, you know, I'm glad to go to church. I mean, I don't care where it is. Our churches should be open. I've never heard anybody, at least in my lifetime, that says you can't come to this church because you're black, can't come to that church because you're white. I think most people go to churches that are close. The church I go to is because it's close to my house, and because I can do more things because it's close to my house. So when they call me on the phone and they say, can you come and help us package food, I can get there quicker. If it was across town, it would take me longer. What happens is that most people are segregated because of housing, and they can't afford it. Many black Americans have been locked out of buying because of their wealth has been reduced under this administration. So if you get more people in, if you build them economically, then they're going to come to places and areas where that is. And most people, it's just like saying, if you go to, like most people at the grocery store, most people only go in a certain radius. So, but, you know, I think that term is used to attack people, to say, well, the church is racist. The church is not racist. The church is Jesus Christ. And people are open to the church. Just go to another church. But don't go to a church for social, you know, moray. Don't choose a church because it's got black people or white people or green people. Choose a church where you're going to grow in Christ. Period. Because that is what that is about. Don't use the church to fit into a social thing. God's message will be heard no matter where you are. What we need to do is build people up economically, and usually they're going to go to places that are close and convenient to them. But I mean, at my church, we have people that come all the way from Fort Worth to come to church. I think that's wonderful. But I mean, that's not typical. And I think that is not, that's just a way people try to say that Christians are racist, and that's the very opposite. This nation, under God, we fought a fight by Christians to end slavery, to end racism, to end segregation, to end sexism, to end, all, you know, and this whole thing they're talking about with homophobia. Most Christians love everybody. Not just because they don't believe in all the tenets of what people are doing doesn't mean they don't love people. So I just think we should not use the church to answer a social call. Use the church to grow in Christ. That's the number one. And if you go to a church that you feel comfortable in, period.
This is our last question. Do you speak to youth groups?
I was invited, like I said, I would speak everywhere. Some of the books that have been donated have been into libraries where, oh, you'll love this. There's a school in Dallas called the Barack Obama School.
Where is that?
Don't worry, they've got some of the books, Being Black and Republican in the Age of Obama, that were donated to that library. But I was invited to speak in Taft, which is a small town by Corpus Christi, to speak to the youth there. So I speak to people because we've got a lot of nation building to do. It would be so easy to just sit at home with my little dog Ruby and just kind of act like everything's okay, but everything's not okay. We know that. And we know we have the lowest participation rate of employment that we've had in years. We know that our debt of nearing $18 trillion is not sustainable. We know that we are in court with them taking out under God from our Pledge of Allegiance. We know that we are more divided in race than we've ever been in my lifetime. And we've got a lot that we're losing. So it is my honor to be before you to tell you my story, asking you to join with me because we can save this nation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. That was terrific. And her book is Being Black and Republican in the Age of Obama. Thank you so much.
Thank
It
you.
was great to have you.